All right, boys and girls, we're going to do a nice little quick wrap-up of the short story, The Interlopers here. This is our second short story, and the short story summary chart, as I said before, if you've got a copy of it, there you can print one off of my web page under Resources. You'll have a copy of the short story summary chart, it's super easy to just make this a set of notes. Short story summary chart, write to, and instead of just filling in the title, you'd write title, make a grid chart just like this. But anyway, The Interlopers is the title of our story. The author is Saki. You can put H.H. Monroe if you'd like to, but that pen name is fine. And the setting of the story is in Europe in the 19th century. Which is 1800s, and it's set in the Carpathian Mountains, and that's important. I want you to make sure you know that. I did review that in the story. I said make sure you're reading the background stuff, but definitely the first line of the story, I'm going to click over to the story. It actually says in the first sentence, in a forest of mixed growth somewhere in the eastern spurs of the Carpathians, a man stood on a winter night watching and listening. So Carpathian mountain range is important for your quiz that you'll be taking right after this video. Also, the setting is on a narrow strip of forest land that we know is not valuable. Our characters are, most importantly, Ulrich von Gradwitz and Georg Znaim. The spellings of these will be important if you do have to answer one of these characters on the quiz. You'll probably have to answer with both, so make sure you're taking down these names carefully, spelling them correctly, so you get credit on the quiz where it's important. Next we have conflict, and conflict was brought up in our story. Oh, by the way, sorry about that. Hunters and wolves are also characters in the story. But as far as conflicts, we started to discuss the conflicts in The Most Dangerous Game, and what I liked about that is that we really saw a great change from the external to the internal conflict in The Most Dangerous Game. We saw him go from really thinking about the nature and the elements of the island and man versus man with Zara, but it was later on in the story that it became an internal conflict for him to stay sane, to stay moving forward. And anyway, in this story we have all four types of conflicts: man versus self, man versus environment, man versus supernatural. In man versus man, obviously we have Ulrich versus Georg, and they're both fighting over this land. The environment is posing a problem for these guys, and they are the wolves at the end, but also the tree in the story, and the storm itself. The hazardous ground that they're on is also man versus environment. Man versus self is both men as they start to realize the futility of the feud. They make an internal change, an internal structural change that says, I will bury the hatchet, you will be my friend. And to put down their family feud and to put that aside to be a friend with this guy is a internal conflict, man versus self. And finally, man versus supernatural. I did imply that it's possible that there is some supreme being or some supernatural force that struck this tree, and the fact that it was struck with lightning and it landed on them relates me. I can kind of understand the connection to Zeus there, so if you could see that too, great. Next, the plot summary. I'm just going to read it through. You may pause if you'd like to pause the video to make sure you're copying this well into your notes. It's a story of two men whose families have fought for decades over a single piece of worthless land. They both head out on a dark and stormy winter night, each intending to kill the other. When they finally meet, a large tree falls on them, pinning the sworn enemies to the ground. Injured and unable to move the tree, the men eventually make peace with one another, working together to call out for help. But instead of catching the attention of their hunters, the men's screams attract a pack of wolves. The men's screams. So the men own the screams. Yeah, that's proper with the apostrophe S. Okay, so the men's screams attract the wolves instead, which is really another great thing to think about at the end. Did that even start to cross your mind? If the men were just quiet there, or angry with one another, and stayed there until their hunters came, if they didn't start screaming, would the wolves have even come? it's kind of a neat little thing to ponder, you know. So anyway, we've got instead of catching the attention of their hunters, the men's screams attract a pack of wolves, and the wolves are brought to them by their own calling for help. If you're finished copying that, great. You continue to scroll down. But the theme of this story definitely is grudges are useless. The uselessness of grudges. Don't hold a grudge. It'll just bring you down morally. It'll bring the other people down. Let things go. Move on. Make up your own mind about people, right? How many times are we influenced by our parents or our grandparents? As I said when I was reading the Interlopers, this reminds me of my grandfather. Great fences build good neighbors, you know. This is my territory. We're all territorial beings. We learn those things from our parents. And, you know, you need to make up your own mind about people. And what they found out, both Georg and Ulrich, was that they both have a lot in common. They both like to hunt. They both love their lands. And, you know, together, they could actually have some good times together. And they start to realize this as they are forced to talk with one another. So just wanted to pose that for you. Two literary terms I did want to focus on. Again, irony, we're focusing on strongly with these short stories when something turns out to be different from what we expect. And conflict. In here, both the internal and external conflict, but conflict is an incompatibility between two or more characters or forces. Okay? Now, reviewing this sheet will be important for the quiz, so if you have these notes, you'll have a couple of answers for the quiz. But a big thing I want to point out before you go to the quiz is back to the story here, because it's going to ask you who owns the land. One of the quiz answers coming up after this video is who owns the land, and we get that in this first paragraph. Now, I want you to read it carefully because I want you to try to find out who owns the land by reading this. But the forest land of Gradwitz were of wide extent and well stocked with game. The narrow strip of precipitous woodland that lay on its outskirt was not remarkable for game it harbored or the shooting it afforded, but it was the most jealously guarded of all its owners' territorial possessions. A famous lawsuit in the days of his grandfather had wrested it, has taken it away from the illegal possession of a neighboring family of petty landowners. So that other neighbor had it illegally, and in the days of his grandfather, they wrested it from the illegal possession of them. Okay. Now, the other neighbor, who we got Ulrich von Gradwitz, the other neighbor is Georg Znaeym. He never acquiesced in this judgment. He doesn't agree to it. That's why he's out there. But who legally owns it? You've got your answer right here. Ulrich von Gradwitz. He is the legal owner of this. So the guy who hunts it illegally is our other character, and we will scroll down to find him on our next page. And it says, if there was a man in the world whom he detested and wished ill to, it was Georg Znaeym, the inheritor of the quarrel. Georg Znaeym is the guy then who hunts illegally. Now, another question about these two characters that's very important is what man makes the first attempt to make peace? And what is that first attempt to make peace? We know that while they're trapped underneath the tree, they are you know, the one guy gets out his flask and he has some wine and he goes, you know, if I threw this to you, do you think you could reach it? And the first reaction is, I don't drink wine with an enemy. Okay? Here it is. It's actually boxed in this text. This is how important this textbook felt it was. Take a look. Could you reach this flask if I threw it over to you? Asked Ulrich suddenly. Okay? Another question that'll be on your quiz. Ulrich suddenly. There is good wine in it, and as one may as well be as comfortable as one can. Let us drink, even if tonight one of us dies. No, I can scarcely see anything. There is much blood in my cake and my only eyes, said Georg, and in any case I don't drink wine with an enemy. So who makes the first gesture here? It is Ulrich. Ulrich is the one who does that. And if you think about it, he is the guy that owns the land. He's the one who's not put aside as easily, you know. I think Georg Znaeym probably still has more harbors of ill will because it's not technically his land. It was taken from him. So Ulrich, the owner, makes the first gesture. And he goes, well, you know, if you can reach it, you know, I would do that. And then the other guy starts contemplating. And they obviously, in the end, choose to become friends. They do decide to become friends. One more thing that I wanted to cover, because it will be on the test, is what actually stops the men from shooting each other in the story? What actually stops the men from shooting each other? And I'll tell you right now, most people think, I want you to think in your head right now, if I were to ask you that question, what stopped the men as they turned and looked at each other from shooting each other? This is the type of answer that on a Regents exam, 80% of the kids would get wrong, because in your head, I know what you're thinking right now, that the tree, right, falls on these guys and stops them from shooting each other. But this, boys and girls, is where you need to read closely. This is a question that's in the text, right after the text, that they want you to think deep, and they set you up for a wrong answer. Because the first thing we think about is that if a tree fell on the guys, and that's what stopped them from shooting each other. You need to read closely all the time. Double check your answers and go back and make sure you got it. Okay? So, what I want you to do is take a look at that part, and that is right on this page here. I'm just going to kind of try to scroll down just a little bit more. If only on this wild night in the lone spot, Garrick's nigh him, a man with none to witness. That was the wish of his uppermost thoughts. As he stepped around the tree trunk of the huge beech, he came face to face with the man he sought. This is right where the men come together. The two enemies stood glaring at one another for a long, silent moment. It says a long, silent moment. Why do they take so long? They both have a gun in their hand, each a rifle in his hand. Each had hate in his heart and murder uppermost in his mind. What stopped them from shooting each other? The chance had come, I'm sorry about that, to give full play to the passions of a lifetime. Both these guys have hated each other since their great-grandfathers. But a man, here's your key, a man who has been brought up under the code of a restraining civilization cannot easily nerve himself to shoot down his neighbor in cold blood without a word spoken. Okay, except of an offense against his hearth and honor. So, kind of what they're saying is, if you had a gun pointed at somebody, pulling that trigger is far different than just pointing the gun or wishing ill will on somebody. You see, we're raised, hopefully, with morals and knowing that this is somebody's life in your hands. And these two men stare there, no matter how great the grudge, they're waiting for the other guy to go, well, do it. You know, you're such an idiot, or some sort of ill will, offense spoken to the other guy. Without that, they can't shoot. It says because they've been brought up under the code of a restraining civilization. Okay? And I'm serious, I didn't make up this question, but this is the type of question you'll get on a Regents exam that gets 80% of the people get wrong. What stops the men from shooting each other that night that they meet? And that one I have put on the quiz for you, and I just gave you the answer. All you need to do is go through and don't choose the tree fell on them, because that's the obvious one that New York State Regents wants you to choose. Okay? Also, one other hard question is I gave you guys a lot of different meanings for the title, the Interlopers. We had the wolves themselves. We had the hunters trespassing on each other's lands. People interfering from the community. The tree itself interloped on them, and was that God? Was that a divine intervention? So all these things are types of interlopers. So there's a question in there. Be careful, because it'll be all of the above. I'll list all those things. Make sure you choose all the above on that question. Okay? All the rest of them should be pretty easy, and I did cover them at some point in this video. Good luck on the quiz. Please take the 7-question quiz, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.